G'day and welcome to another special episode of Kochie's Business Builders, where we'll be taking a deeper look at the issues facing small business owners in 2023. Now, if you're keen to get the lowdown on how you can access capital for your next great business idea, this episode is for you. Joining me today is co-host, Startup Daily editor Simon Thomsen and Hannah Mourney, two experts in the startup ecosystem. Hannah is an investment analyst from VC fund Giant Leap. If you're keen to find out the ins and outs of how to attract investors, Hannah has some terrific advice. Simon is the editor of Startup Daily and the host of Startup Daily TV. And you guessed it, when it comes to startups, Simon has seen it all and knows everything you need to know. Welcome to you both.
Great to be here, Kochie.
Good to see you. Simon, full disclosure, Startup Daily is part of my family business, Pinstripe Media, so suffice to say, we love startups. Tell us what got you interested in the startup ecosystem.
Thanks, boss. Well, I reckon that the thing that blows me away about it is just this constant parade of new ideas. Problems that kind of lie around and perhaps annoy us, but we never think about how to fix them. There are people all around the world who are thinking very deeply about it and setting out to solve them.
It's quite inspiring, isn't it? It's a great community to travel in, and Hannah, you see them all as well. You've met so many founders. What do you look for in a startup founder?
For sure. When we're first meeting founders, one of the first questions we like to ask is if they can take us on the journey that they went on to start the business. And that's a fantastic way to understand who they are as a person, what they care about, and why that they think that this problem is so important to solve. And you really get to the crux of why they're there.
How important is you having faith in the founder rather than the idea, or is it equal?
Founders are key. I think the people are at the early stages in which we invest as VC investors. They're pretty much the business. The business is them. So you're really counting on, do they have the passion for the problem and the tenacity to succeed in the long run?
Yeah, so when you're pitching as a founder, understand it's not just the idea, it's marketing you to investors.
For sure, and it is marketing, but it's also, you're starting a really long-term relationship. You have to build trust, so we don't want to hear a pitch that's all fancy. We don't want to hear just the good things. We want to also understand what you're struggling with and what challenges you're facing and whether we have the skills to help you along on that journey.
We're going to touch on this later, but there seems to be an imbalance between men and women getting funding for new founders. Why is that?
There's a lot of factors at play. It's a really complex issue, and one of them is that there's not enough women or diverse investors making these decisions. They might not be across all of the problems that are out there, and they might be biased towards the types of businesses that they've seen succeed in the past. So I think a key issue is getting enough women and other people at the table making these decisions.
We used to call it the old school tie, Kochie. Remember, it was that thing of who you knew, and this is all about networks. I think things are starting to change, and I know there are a bunch of VCs and impact funds like Giant Leap are really committed to that sense of equity and equality in what they're doing. So there are people working to make a change, but we do have such a long way to go.
Let's get back to starting your new business and making your dream come true. Hannah, so many people bootstrap it themselves, put their own cash in. Is that wise?
It's a really big question, and when you're looking for any type of funding, what you're really trying to balance is the economics and control over the business. I think bootstrapping is fantastic if you can afford to do it, but not everybody can. And the main benefit of bootstrapping is really that you get to maintain the control and ownership over the business. So you don't have to listen to any pesky investors tell you what you should or should not be doing. But you're also able to keep all the upside to yourself if it goes well.
Simon, another option is crowdfunding. A couple of weeks ago, we had Manu on, the famous chef who's crowdfunding his new range of sauces. Yep. What's crowdfunding and what role does that play?
Crowdfunding is basically, as you know, with most private investment, there are only certain people who can be part of that investment. They're high net worths, they're called sophisticated investors. They've got a lot of money and they can afford to lose it because we're talking about a high risk investment here in the startup space. Crowdfunding is got much more of a retail focus to it. So you and I can invest in these. The government allows us to put in up to $10,000 into crowdfunding. Others can put more in if they qualify, but in this instance, I think retail is a really good example. So we've seen lots of boutique breweries, we've seen distilleries, Manu, as you mentioned. A great example, I actually think, is Mike Smith from the Byron Bay waste reduction business, Zero Co. Now, you may have seen those household cleaning products and body wash and everything in Woolworths now. He's got a distribution deal there. But he did this as a crowdfunding project and got the record of $3 million in just a couple of hours. It was absolutely extraordinary, because the great thing about crowdfunding is generally they're your customers and they are brand advocates. They believe in you. So they're invested not just financially, but emotionally in the business.
And that's the key. That's a type of business that suits crowdfunding perfectly. A recent study by Deloitte Access Economics has found only 0.7% of all private startup funding last year went to solely female founder teams, despite funding increasing tenfold over the last 4 years. As a result, women are not raising the amount of capital needed to scale their business. Now, shifting the dial on funding presents a significant economic opportunity to Australia to better leverage our female entrepreneurs. However, to do so requires structural and behavioural change across the entire startup ecosystem. Hannah, it's a topic close to your heart. What needs to change?
It's a great question. I think there's a lot that needs to change, but one place to start is really giving women access to the networks and the knowledge that they need to succeed in the long run. So one of the biggest challenges is that women just aren't having these conversations, and it starts really young. Girls miss out on opportunities to learn about investing in finance, and they don't see themselves in business leadership roles all the time. But the great news is that there's some really fantastic organisations out there, the likes of Scale Investors, SBE, One Roof and the Creative Cooperative, that have a great number of programs and tools and resources to really help women succeed when they want to start a business. And they just need to know that it is possible and there is support out there.
Simon, is this the bigger issue, that we need to be supporting, as Hannah says, women from a young age, inspiring them with great role models?
Yeah, and look, I think we're going to get there. I cast your mind back, Kochie, a couple of decades where you used to have to take your husband to the bank to get financed. You know, that's how archaic we were. So we're moving the dial, but we do have a long way to go. And I am really hopeful that the momentum will happen quickly. We've got the Victorian government and the New South Wales government both establishing funds that will invest in women-led companies. So that's good news. They're also bringing other capital to the table, using the power of that funding to leverage it, and I think we'll start to get this change. And then once the momentum builds up, the successful women will then turn around and back the next generation of women. So once we get going, that flywheel will really start to spin quickly.
So Hannah, what's your advice to female entrepreneurs looking to raise capital in the market?
You need to access these networks that are out there to support you, tap into these programs, go on the journey of learning what investors are looking for when you're raising capital, but also just back yourselves to succeed. Realise that most people, business owners, don't necessarily know what they're doing from the get-go, and you just kind of have to give it a chance and learn along the journey. And there's plenty of people that are out there to support you, and plenty of investors that really care about supporting women founders to succeed in the long run.
And that's the thing, David, about startups. You are making something up from scratch. You know, most of the time a business model is already there and you can step into that. But in this case, you are on the fly all the time, figuring out how it's going to work. And that can be quite daunting. I think women absolutely have that skill, but you know, blokes have that ability to convince themselves that they can fix everything, even when they can't. I think adopting that mindset in tackling an issue is a really important part of that challenge.
Yeah, Simon's very delicately saying, I think, Hannah, blokes tend to have more BS about them. Women are a lot more honest and maybe too hard on themselves. Do you reckon that's right?
For sure. I think, we know from Giant Leap that investing in women is just smart business. Women make fantastic leaders. Diverse founders make fantastic leaders.
Better returns.
Better returns, often 12% higher revenues with a third of the funding input needed. They're just smart business owners. So
Why?
Because they have to be careful with the money that they're given, because they get given less, they take less risks, they make smarter choices sometimes.
Right. Is it dependent on the type of sector that they're starting up in? Is that a big role? Are there particular industries that are more likely to fund female entrepreneurs?
I think we see from an impact perspective a lot of women founders trying to start businesses because they care passionately about the problems that are in the impact space, like climate, sustainability, healthcare, education. They're areas naturally where women often have a strong level of passion, but also an expertise, and they can really see themselves solving these problems and making the businesses of the future there. So I think we see in our portfolio a really high representation of women. We've got 30% solely women-founded businesses in our portfolio and 55% businesses with at least one woman founder. And that's, from my perspective, because of our impact tinge on what we're investing into.
Absolutely. Earlier in the show, we were talking about the different options you can take when trying to get the capital you need for your startup or business. Hannah, what advice would you give to somebody on how to successfully pitch your idea to investors?
Sure. I think it's important to understand that pitching to an investor isn't essentially what it looks like on Shark Tank. It's more of a conversation, a relationship that you're building with an investor. You need to take them on the journey with you and get them excited about the business that you're building. I think there's a few key things that investors are really looking for. It's a tricky problem that you're trying to solve, and the reason why that you as a founder are the right person to be solving this problem.
How is it different to Shark Tank?
How is it different? We're not trying to tear you down. We're trying to see if this is a business that we're excited about, that we want to be in for the long haul, and whether or not we as investors can help support you on that journey. It has to be a good fit on both sides.
So in other words, don't get scared off by Shark Tank, because people will be watching shows like that thinking, oh God, I can't do that and they're so mean. Why would I want to put myself through it? Simon, you've been a judge on so many pitch competitions. You've seen the good, the bad, the ugly. Are there common themes to success that you've picked up?
First of all, be clear about what it is that you want to talk about. Secondly, it is about storytelling. You have to have a very good story. And the other thing is, don't get caught up, and we're talking tech here, in the technology itself. Talk about how it solves the problem, how people will feel in that context, and why it matters.
Hannah, what sort of questions can you expect investors to ask? What are the key ones?
Yeah, they'll be asking you what the problem you're trying to solve is and why now is the time to solve this problem. They'll be asking you what skills and experience you have that mean that you're uniquely placed to be the one to solve this problem. They'll be definitely trying to understand how big this market is and whether there's an opportunity for your business to grow to a venture scale. So essentially to become the next Canva or Uber, so globally relevant. And lastly, it's really what is your competitive advantage? What makes your business successful in the long run versus competitors?
Does a founder need to be flexible with their ideas and take feedback from investors? Or when you pitch, do you say, right, this is my dream, I'm not going to waver from it?
There's a bit of give and take. I think no investor's going to work with somebody that is not going to listen to what they have to say. But I think the best founders have a lot of advisors and a lot of feedback, and they cherry pick it for what they think is right for their business. Because ultimately, we're backing founders to run their business. We're not trying to run it for you.
And you're also taking on a series of professional investors who have a great deal of experience and understanding. They have a big umbrella view of what's going on in any given space. They might not be experienced around what you're doing, but by the same token, the fundamentals of business don't change too dramatically, whatever sector you're in, and what they bring to the table can be really valuable.
Hannah, it is a big wide world out there. I suppose it's a big positive. There's plenty of options for funding. Where do you start? Where's your first step to getting access and finding out more?
For sure, you need to start by doing your research, and there's a lot of information out there, particularly by organisations that have been set up to support founders on their journey. So a great example is Startup Vic in Victoria, which supports a lot of Victorian founders. There's co-working spaces where startups tend to hang out, like the Commons or Fish Burners, where you'll meet a lot of other founders, learn about their journeys. There's a lot of events that are hosted, and that's a great place to get resources and information in order to know what type of funding is right for your business.
And of course, Simon, the Bible of the startup community.
Startupdaily.net, David.
Exactly right. And Startup Daily TV. Guys, some great advice, really inspiring, and it's up to you guys. If you've got a dream, you've got an idea, you've got the advice from Hannah and Simon. We really appreciate it. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Kochie.
Thanks for having me.